Many have come and many have failed in Africa, because Africa is not what it seems to the unknowing eye. Allow me to reveal some of Mama Africa's secrets to you. When you think about entrepreneurship in Africa, you may think about mass unemployment and a lack of entrepreneurship. At the tender age of 6, my parents packed up our bags and our familiar Western way of life and took my sister and I south, deep south, to South Africa. Now, at the not so tender age of 40, I call myself an African. Let me share some insights about this continent I now call home. The population of Africa is set to explode from 1 billion to 4 billion by the year 2100. Over 40% of the world's youth population will call Africa home by that time. So what does that mean? Well, these additional 3 billion people are going to need railroads, cars, homes, malls, and schools. They'll need to be medicated, fed, and entertained. To some, Africa may seem like a primitive continent, but to others, it is a huge opportunity. This truly is the last blue sky left on the planet. And any business person should take a keen interest in the continent and its population. Why? Well, statistically, there are more entrepreneurs in Africa than anywhere else in the world per capita. In South Africa, 40% of the economy is comprised of the informal economy. And most of the people participating in this shadow economy are self-employed. We call those entrepreneurs. And to stay ahead, they're constantly innovating and disrupting. And you know what? This economy is functioning efficiently with speed and resilience. It's funny, I always see it when I drive to the office and I see those guys selling stuff at the street corners. It always amazes me how they get the zeitgeist of the population just so right. So when our national electricity provider announces that there's going to be load shedding, within hours, these guys are selling battery-operated lanterns. And as soon as spring showers hit the town, the next day these guys are selling umbrellas. Can you imagine what could happen if these guys all got the right entrepreneurial education? When it comes to connectivity, Africa is the continent that doesn't connect via PCs or laptops, but rather all through their mobile phones. Many of them may not have bank accounts, but there is no one that doesn't understand virtual money. M-Pesa, a telecommunications product launched in 2007 in Kenya, allows people the opportunity to use their phones as mobile payment devices. It now accounts for a staggering 40% of the GDP transactions of Kenya, and that's in 9 years. Before M-Pesa, rural fishermen in Kenya used to be price takers. Every day, they'd go out and fish randomly and simply hope for the best. And if the fish that they caught was in oversupply, they would get paid less or even nothing. But now, with M-Pesa, they can get real-time feedback on what the market is paying and for which fish, optimize their search, and in turn, go from being price takers to price makers. These are simple, uneducated fishermen. But because of technology and innovation, these guys can go from surviving to thriving. We call it a unique African solution to a unique African problem. It's quite funny. There is a well-known acronym that I often use when something strange happens to me on my business travels around the continent. You know, when the hotel that I'd booked months in advance just happens to be fully booked by the time I try to check in, or when the police officer stops me and asks me for that never-before-heard-of document or else pay a fine. I always just say, TIA. This is Africa. But verbalizing it reminds me not to be stressed or concerned, but rather to immerse myself in it, because therein lies the opportunity to create efficiency, to optimize, to add value, and hopefully in the process, to make some money. So how do Africans behave differently from the rest of the world in business? Well, having been a dragon on the South African version of the global series Dragon's Den, I got to see a series of entrepreneurs pitch their wares. The experience was fascinating. The entrepreneurs were motivated and hungry, but their concepts were social in nature. They weren't as focused on making money as much as they wanted to sell more kerosene cartridges to save shack fires from happening. Or, as another example, bit of a crazy one, they wanted to create a machine that converts manure to home lighting. And us dragons, the investors, we too were different. We didn't fight each other for the next best deal, but rather we chose to partner up, to share the opportunity and the risk. And we didn't scream and shout at the entrepreneurs in front of us. We supported and mentored them. The global producers of the show said it was a very strange season of Dragon's Den. Strange to them, so obvious to us. In Zulu, we say, izandla ziyagezana. One hand washes the other. And it is this realization that allowed me to take a two-man startup with no capital and no clients and turn it into one of the largest advertising agencies on the continent. For the past 15 years, we have done anything but traditional advertising. No TV, no radio, no print, and no billboard. Our version of social media is placing thousands of promoters across the continent on behalf of our clients' brands. They go door to door and sell, promote, educate, and sample. Yeah, the newest form of advertising is actually also the oldest. You may call it social media. We call it word of mouth. So why do so many companies that come into Africa fail? I think it's because they misunderstand something fundamental. You see, us Africans, we may have modernized, but we certainly have not westernized. My fellow entrepreneurs, we can help this continent thrive, but we must empower local wisdom and foster and educate entrepreneurs. We need to respect that in Africa, the past is more important than the future. We need to understand the spirit of Ubuntu, the brotherhood of man. That's way more important than making money. And lastly, we need to learn to see the complexity and the sophistication where we least expect it. TIA. This is Africa. Thank you.
Gil, when I was hearing your speech back there, I couldn't help but think to myself, T-I-Y. This is YPO. So Gil, a couple of questions for you. And the first is, what is the aspect about Africa and entrepreneurship that makes you passionate, that inspires you?
I think it's probably because in Africa, pretty much anything can happen, and it usually does. I always say that to my guys. It's exciting because I could wake up in the morning, and really, by the time I go to sleep that night, I'm like, what the hell just happened? And I love that. And I guess you make a difference, and that means a lot to me. Yeah.
I have another question here that says, if one wants to invest in Africa, what are the top 2 elements needed in order for them to succeed?
Okay. I guess the first thing is I strongly recommend finding local partners and doing a lot of checking that they're on the level. I know it sounds crazy, but you could really lose a lot of money. You know what they say, in order to make $1 million, you need to start with $1 billion. So you need to get your partners right. And secondly, I think you need to appreciate that even though I've been speaking about Africa as a continent, it's not homogeneous. It's made up of many, many countries, and even within each country, there are so many diverse sects and cultures, and if you respect and understand that, you could probably do very well.